So here are a few do's and don'ts of button design. Number 1.
Welcome to the Real E-Commerce Podcast, your go-to for straight talk and smart tips from the world of online retail.
So what are the primary objectives of buttons on your website? So the first one is they need to facilitate the user action. So we want to tell the user what to do, and we're trying to guide them towards a specific outcome. The other objective of a button is enhancing the user experience. So we want to signal where we want the user to click next, and we want to reduce kind of confusion or frustration. So here are a few do's and don'ts of button design. Number 1, so use action verbs as button labels. What do I mean by that? Well, like button labels motivate users to take action. To effectively convey like the button's purpose, we want to use the function as a label. So if we want the customer to click delete, or we want them to delete a file, it's far better to label that as delete as the action rather than okay. So it's kind of clarity is key here. We always want to choose button labels that are straightforward and meaningful to the user. And we want to create that like immediate understanding. So when we see button labels like save or preview or publish, we instantly know what they mean, as opposed to like okay or next. So yeah, use those action verbs as button labels. Next on the list of do's and don'ts is like don't wrap text on buttons. So when we say wrap text, we mean kind of make it go on to 2 lines. You want to avoid wrapping text and ensure that it all stays on one single line. What it will do, it will enhance the readability of the button. So, we naturally read from left to right. And a single line of text is far easier to scan. It maintains like visual clarity. So buttons with wrap text can appear a bit cluttered or uneven, and they might sort of detract from the overall design. And we want to promote consistency. So keeping all buttons on one line helps maintain like a uniform look throughout the whole of the website. Number 3, on the button do's and don'ts is don't use disabled buttons. So I don't know if you've ever come to a site and until you complete all the fields, the button remains disabled. We want to avoid that because it can create confusion, and it kind of it takes away that interactivity of what the next steps are. So if you're far better off kind of labeling the fields or highlighting the fields which need the content or need the input than graying out the button until the next step. What we want to do here is like maintain the interaction flow. So disabled buttons disrupt that user experience, and users may feel frustrated when they see like a grayed out button, but they don't know why it's grayed out. So if we could just use prompts on the fields to highlight the relevant fields when the user fails to put the right information in, but keep the button active, that's going to be a far better user experience on your buttons. Number 4 is don't use 2 icons on one single button. Like the example I've got in front of me is like an add to cart button, but it's got a picture of a cart and then it's got a plus. So we've used 2 icons on that, and this can cause confusion of what the button's true function is. What we want to do really is create like a clarity of meaning. So each icon carries its own sort of visual significance, and combining 2 can lead to ambiguity. We want to reduce confusion, so users may find it challenging to determine which icon sort of indicates what the button's going to do. And all buttons really should just have a single purpose. So the icon should effectively represent what that purpose is. Number 5, we want to make the primary action button stand out. That sounds simple enough, but I can't tell you the amount of times that we've seen like a proceed to checkout or whatever it is gray, which is the same as the cancel button. But we want to ensure that primary action button is prominent. It's prominent on the page. It's visually impactful. And you want to consider things like the visual weight, the color, the size, and the placement. So how do we increase the visual weight? The primary button should have like a bigger visual prominence or a greater visual prominence. You can achieve this through like boldness, borders, drop shadows, those sorts of things. We want to use a contrasting color. So the color of the primary button should stand out against the rest of the interface and make it like really easily identifiable as the next action. And then we want to think about the strategic placement. So the position of the primary action button is essential. It should be located where users naturally expect to find it. If you think about when you go through some web experiences, next is, primarily always on the right, and back or previous is always on the left. So the progressive button should always be on the right because that's the way we're heading. We read left to right, we move that way in most journeys. And when we visually represent a journey, that's how we draw it out from left to right. So yeah, again, strategic placement, that action button should be on the right. And if there is a reverse, i.e. cancel or back, again, that should be on the left. Number 6 is placing buttons side by side. Like the don't here is don't stack buttons. So if you can avoid placing a button directly below another button or on top of another button, providing there's sufficient space, it will help the user make a quicker decision. So arranging buttons next to each other enables us to compare options more easily and make sort of faster choices. It's also, again, we keep saying it's the reading pattern left to right. There's also, we want to prevent a perceived hierarchy here. So stacking buttons can unintentionally suggest like a hierarchy, making one button appear more significant than the other. So yeah, don't stack buttons if you've got the space. And finally, the last one is stick to standard button layouts. Like if you went through your website now and changed all your buttons to triangles, you would confuse the hell out of people. But believe it or not, some people go through and do this. They change buttons to round, or there's no consistency throughout of the button shape. So buttons really should resemble the conventional button style or button layout, button format. Uncommon shapes and designs can lead, rightly to some user confusion. And what we really want to do is we want to promote and ensure consistency. So adhering to a standard button design kind of fosters uniformity across whatever you're presenting on an app or a website or any other platform. And maybe it's good to create like a style guide for your buttons. So, this could be for all your websites, applications, and it will help maintain like a cohesive theme throughout the design. We've actually just done a course in our academy on Don't Push My Buttons. So if you want to recap on this, or you want some visual guides that help sort of show you this visually, then feel free to take a look at that and go away and get your buttons pushed.
Follow the Real E-commerce podcast and visit realagency.co.uk for more e-commerce content like this.